Look to the future, eh? I mean, it's getting to that point now. Ooh. Is it? Yeah, it's Colt's, home. No. It is. She had red hair like yours, and I shot her. Whoa. Wow. Oh God. Falling into same patterns, repeating the same mistakes. Ah, of course. I mean, that's, again, like a really old-timey a tool of destruction. A lot of anger, eh? Ooh. Ah. You've got to break the cycle. But look at Kai. Oh. But there's some that remembered. Ooh, I didn't get to see the eyes. Speaking of souls. Ah, right. Oh, you believe in it now, though. Ah, this theme. But now? Huh, look at that. Oh yeah, I saw all of that throughout the Chimera Ant arc. Oh, beautiful depiction of it. Should have killed them. I've seen that shot a few times now. His reflection. Right. I mean, really truly inherited that appearance. Oh. Oh yeah, she listened, but I think it's time to speak now. Oh.
お前が撃った私のそばでこれからずっとこれしかないって生き方をするんだ。これはお前の義務だ。選択の余地なんかない。自ら死んでリセットなんて誰が許すか。毎日あたちに謝りながら生きろ。二度とこのままでいいのかなんて暇でクソな考えがもたげないくらいこき使って。
There you go, Mr. Koala.
あたちに謝りながらあたちの言う通り働いてあたちのために生きるんだ。
A bit of structure.
もしお前がちょっとでも今の覚悟を忘れて堕落したら
I'll remind you.
あたちが殺してやる。
Or that.
安心して生きろ。
Wow. Oh, it's gone. Interesting. That whole I mean, that's half the episode, pretty much, right? To focus on that right before Gon shows up. There's a presence about this kite. Different type of presence.
ああ、ごめん。来い。座れ。
I mean, at the end of the day, this is Meruem's twin, right? Kind of.
何にだ。
Yeah, Gon gets a close-up of the eyes as well.
一緒に戦えなかった。力が足りなかった。次は俺がカイトを守るよ。
あいつをピトーを倒すのにだいぶ無茶したらしいな。
うん、死にかけた。
それでもお前が俺の倒せなかった敵を倒したのは事実だ。俺の目に狂いはなかったと負け惜しみを言っとくか。
I suppose.
でもキルアがみんながいなかったら俺はここにいなかった。俺一人でここに来られたわけじゃないんだ。
お互い修行が足りなかったな。
Interesting. Huh. Oh, the crew. Good to see it, man. A cult?
あったそうだな。
ジンと話したの？
ああ。
Ah, of course.
お前が言いたいことは分かった。わざわざ来てくれて嬉しいよ。助けがいるときは必ずお前に連絡する。キルアにもよろしくな。
Can Gon help in that capacity, though?
俺たちはもう仲間だ。
Equals.
だから今はジンさんのとこへ帰れ。
Look at that. Wow, imagine the burden that's been lifted. The GOAT. OG.
楽になりたくて全てから逃げようとした。苦しくても生きてみるよ。精一杯やったって死ぬ時を思えるように。
Good choice to focus on that right before Gon came in. Yeah. Of course he's not here, man. Oh. That's a challenge.
止めたんですけど。
確かにここで待つとは言ってなかったな。
Oh. It happened off screen. That's a choice. Interesting choice. Big choice. Oh. Hand selected spot. Aging. Oh.
世界最大の木。
街の中心にそびえ立つ世界樹は地上からの高さは
Is that the narrator again? I think it is. I mean, it kind of even looks like Peggy. Yeah, I'm sure it's quite a challenge. Don't think anyone can just stroll up there.
年間延べ約3000人が挑戦しますが、残る 1% は落下して命を落とします。つまり頂上まで無事に登り、かつ降りてこられる強者は年間延べにしてわずか30名しかいないのです。
Yeah, he does remind me of Peggy. I think that's the idea here, right? Reminiscent of Peggy. I mean, it's the same voice.
じゃあ俺たちはここで。
This is it.
気をつけてな。キルはいろいろ本当にありがとう。あ、まあ目の前で俺一人で倒すからってはぶられたり、お前関係ねえからって言われた時は相当落ちたけどな。
It's a cheeky approach, but you know,
本当にごめんよ。
you could tell Killua accepted it. That's why he can joke about it.
もう謝ってもらったし、お前と旅したおかげで今あるかと入れるって言っても過言じゃねえし。ちなみにお前のこと直したのこいつだから。それ本当？なんでこんなタイミングで？
By choice, he's telling you now rather than before.
知ってるやつがいっぱいいるとちょっとな。
Look at Luca's face.
家庭の事情があってよ。何か呼んでいいか。
He'll love this.
こいつの能力は俺のお願いを何でも叶えてくれるっていうものなんだけど。何でも？
Yeah.
そのすごすぎる能力のせいで家に閉じ込められっぱなしだったんだ。こいつはお前がきっかけでこうして外に出られたし。 俺もこいつを一生かけて守る覚悟ができた。
That's his purpose now gone. Yeah, he gets it.
感謝してんのは
Oh.
俺たちの方なんだよ。
はい。
Oh.
そんな俺の方こそ本当にありがとう。
A lot of thanking, eh? Oh. Yeah, there's a tension. Melancholy just coursing through
ダメだ。
this section of the episode.
これ以上いたら
It'll be even more difficult.
だな。俺はこれからアルカといろんなとこ旅するから。ま、ちょくちょくメールするよ。
Wow, this is it.
いっぱい貸してるからね。
I love that he could joke
おや
about
じ
it.
さんによろしくな。はい。本当は一緒に行きたいけど、アルカいるし。
He told Bisky, right?
まだ
All
デ
that
ィフィ
time
ーラス
ago.
で話してねえんだろ。また今度な。
しばらくの間独り占めしたらお兄ちゃん解放しますからまた遊んであげてくださいね。
ちょい待て。あげてんのは俺の方。いい妹だろ。悪いけどお前二の次だから。
Wow.
カイトも言ってたよ。俺たちどこにいても仲間だから。
Oh, yeah. There's a lot that's left unsaid. I mean, it's as bittersweet as it gets. Oh, don't do this. The Greed Island theme or ending. Great choice. Yeah, I remember that. Killua's light, but now he's got to be the light for Aluka. Yeah, I'm going back to Greed Island, man. As soon as possible. It's so much fun. Yes, Knuckle. This is a celebration. I like this approach. Even though it's really quite bittersweet, you know? The actual goodbye. Oh. Oh. Good choice. Perfect choice. Okay, folks, that's episode 147. You know, as I sit here, getting ready to tackle this episode, it really kind of feels surreal. It does. You know, because honestly, it doesn't really even feel like that long ago. You know, I found myself saying things like, okay, you know, this really truly feels like the beginning of an incredible friendship, right? You could just tell. Sometimes you just feel it, you see it on the screen. And, you know, that's exactly how I felt back in the Hunter exam arc, right? The moment Killua noticed gone and the moment they easily just kind of latched onto each other, right? And of course, the rest is history. And now I arrive at this point. Journey's end, the parting of ways, the long goodbye and all of that, right? I mean, it certainly threatened to become a long goodbye, and both Gon and Killua recognize that, right? And they understand, okay, you know, now it's going to become even more difficult if they don't, I don't know, disengage, or if they don't actually follow through at this point, right? And, you know, it's again, you know, this idea of it feeling surreal, and, you know, also, yes, you know, like I said, there's a tension, there's a melancholy, but also, you know, there is, and I honestly do feel like this is by design, there is a bit of hollowness to all of it. I'm sure, I mean, it is really quite sad, rather sad for me as well, right? It is an emotional parting, but I'm sure, you know, many of you have been around this story, and you've loved this story for years and years at this point, right? So for you, there's a bit of a different, perhaps, attachment to it, you know? In comparison to someone like me who's actually experiencing it for the first time. But, you know, that being said, I think it's actually been really quite clear to me for some time now that, you know, many of you actually have a far more deeper attachment to this friendship than I do at this point. Again, it's my first time going through it. But listen, I'm not trying to diminish anything here. I'm just trying to give you my, I don't know, immediate feelings on the matter. The sense of hollowness that I do feel that Togashi has kind of built in the approach of this parting. Sure, it's devastating, it's heartbreaking, but there's also the sense of that friendship never being the same again, right? There is a fracture that is permanent, perhaps, or rather than being permanent, that fracture essentially kind of fundamentally changed the dynamic of the friendship. I mean, yes, there's still respect, immense respect and love, and care for each other, but fundamentally it has changed forever. And I think both of them actually kind of accept that, right? Even if a lot of it is left unsaid, that much is also clear in this episode. I mean, you can actually even kind of look at it as both of them putting on a brave face. I think that is actually even kind of clear to see, because the moment they turn around and they're not looking at each other anymore, I feel that both of their true feelings actually kind of slip through or actually show up, right? Now that the other one cannot actually see it, right? So even the fact that they had to do that, or they felt the need to do that they can't truly showcase their feelings at this point to each other, again, it's quite telling. A lot is said in the spoken and the unspoken, and I do think it is heartbreaking that both of them thought that they can't really show that side of them to each other at this point in time as they say goodbye, right? But again, it does show on their faces the moment they turn around. Immediately it's the same thing for both. There's this sadness that's there, right? And that is felt by us, the audience, as well, throughout that whole scene before them actually parting. But then you see Killua kind of maintains that sadness, or the sadness is clear to see in his face the whole time. Gon is sad, but then as he holds that sadness, as he carries that sadness, but he's also kind of able to have that resolve for the next steps, for the next task at hand, and that is actually finding Jing. And also, that's not just a task at hand, that is essentially one of the main reasons for his entire trajectory, his entire story arc, his journey, right? I want to become a hunter, and I really want to see why exactly Jing felt that he has to pursue this, right? And leaving his own son behind. Gon always saw that. I saw that in his behavior really early on. And Mito-san is, of course, not baffled, but she's probably sad about this too. That Gon actually almost kind of gives Jing a pass, kind of. I mean, I always felt that a part of Mito-san always wanted Gon to be a bit more, critical of that father. But Jing actually leaving him behind, it actually sparked something within Gon, right? That's been there since day one, essentially. And now he's within distance, within touching distance. I say that, but it's about to be another challenge, one final challenge to overcome, to go see Jing. And I suspect that the finale is going to be mainly focused on that, right? Or at least a strong chunk, or a big chunk rather, is going to be allocated to that. Jing and Gon coming together, a proper one-on-one. As Killua also reiterated, you need a one-on-one. I would love to tag along and join you. And again, like I was about to say, I begin to say it, but then I kind of hold back because I don't want to speak over dialogue. Gon told Bisky back in Jing Island. Greed Island is kind of like Jing Island, isn't it? But yeah, back in Greed Island, in the conclusion, he told Bisky, he wants he wants Jing to meet Killua, right? That's at the top of his mind. So again, there's these really bittersweet moments. I mean, it really kind of begins to feel like death by 1,000 blunt needles, right? It adds up. It piles up. And once it all adds up and piles up, and they have to say goodbye for good, for now at least, for the foreseeable future even. And listen, before I go any further, I think it's good. They needed this. They need this. Both of them need this. And they understand it. I think they both understand it. Even if, they are sad about the whole thing, they understand that this is good for them, right? It is. It simply is. And to be frank, at no point did I feel that, I need Gon to join Aluka and Killua, right? And that's me looking out for Gon as well, and looking out for Killua and Aluka. Yeah, everything about this felt natural, right? But just because it feels natural doesn't mean that, it's not sad, that it's not, heartbreaking, and really just quite difficult to experience, right? The bittersweet nature of it. But it's a good thing. At the end of the day, I think I can truly claim and feel that this is a good thing. And also another thing I really liked about this is that, this aspect of it, right? It's a major component. It's a significant component of, this story of this anime, this incredible friendship. The thing I really liked here is that it's actually not going to be, bleeding into the next episode, right? There's a definitive conclusion here in the penultimate episode, right? This episode is used for that, though. Of course, you see that at least half of the episode's runtime is allocated and dedicated to the return of our pink koala, who I haven't really seen since that time a bunch of them decide to stay behind in the nest, right? The ones that are still kind of loyal to the dying queen. Now, I'm not saying he's loyal to the dying queen, but him making the choice to stay behind and be in that nest, that's really quite telling as well, isn't it? Now, of course, to be honest, it's a shock. It is a shock that, he's brought back in at this point and given that much time of this penultimate episode. But that being said, I think it actually ends up being really quite functional and really quite effective and significant to, perhaps even the Chimera Ant arc, right? Kind of wrapping it up and kind of, summarizing and kind of bookending some of the, major components of that arc. And also, the contrast with Gon and his apology right after Koala's attempt at an apology, right? Again, it's nuanced and I'll get there. But yeah, at the end of the day, I do think that this segment has its place in this episode. But, that being said, I still think it's a bold choice. It's quite a, I don't know, not a risky choice, but a ballsy choice. It's an interesting choice. I mean, the episode itself is full of interesting and bold choices. Again, one of them being, Gon and Killua reuniting off screen. And again, them kind of talking it out being off screen, the apology being off screen. There's merit to that. There is merit to that. I believe, because of course, choosing to have all of that off screen is also quite a substantial choice, right? And again, I'll explore all of that. I don't want to deviate too much from the initial point, and that's, Jing and Gon and their imminent reunion, proper reunion at this point. Because again, it's more of a chance encounter, and it doesn't really count them in, at Hunter HQ. But yeah, the thing is, this idea of Gon, wanting to truly understand the things that, Jing felt for, this line of work and, that trajectory, being a hunter, a professional hunter. The thing is, Gon already has quite a decent understanding for that at this point, given that he's experienced some incredible things in this time, 2 years almost at this point. And as I truly believe, and I've felt this since I think Greed Island, right? That Jing actually wanted it to play out like this for Gon, right? He wanted this trajectory for Gon. Again, in the process of locating him or finding him or hunting him down and all of that, much like how Kite's kind of, sent on quite the journey before he's able to locate Jing. So, it's the same thought process here. And listen, Gon goes on a journey and then some, right? I mean, the kid has returned from the brink of death. Yes, the journey took him a little too far, but that's more so to do with some of his self-destructive tendencies and his self-destructive nature, perhaps some of his selfish nature as well, right? In terms of, pushing it to the extreme and, beyond that extreme and all of that. But listen, one thing that is clear to me, and it has been clear since his almost at resurrection, he didn't really die, but since him being healed, is that he understands the magnitude of his mistakes, and the people that he's wronged, and the people that he's upset, and that he does need to make it right. He himself feels like he needs to make it right. I mean, others can tell him all of that, of course, right? But at the end of the day, he himself has to feel it, right? the remorse. And this also kind of brings in the koala, right? Because you see that the koala actually struggles quite a bit in forgiving himself, right? He just doesn't see it. He doesn't see it as a possibility. And of course, you see in both sit downs, Kite plays an integral role for both of those people, for Koala and Gon. Really different approaches, right? Tailored to each one of those unique individuals. Kite's approach with the koala and Kite's approach with Gon. You see different sides of the new Kite. Even though, I'll be honest, it doesn't truly feel like Kite, even though, of course, the memories are most definitely there. They made it that much clear. And the soul happens to be there, right? But it's in the body of, or in the reincarnated body of the little girl that the koala killed, right? He initially thought, that it's a mercy kill, right? He looked at it from that perspective, but he really truly felt that he's deluding himself, the koala that is, right? That ultimately, he made the wrong choice. He should have killed the attackers. But, again, he is also trying to protect himself at that point, right? These are his own words, essentially. But, also before I move on from that point, this idea that the koala actively actually, wanted these people, at this, in this case, this little girl to kind of just meet her end and, let it be, instead of reincarnating and that cycle continuing. I think there is merit to that, So again, I'll come back to this section. I don't want to diminish it completely, this idea of mercy killing, but really quite specifically, I suppose ending the brain, destroying the brain, because I suppose he connected the brain being intact to the soul also being intact, I suppose. So, he felt that if he can destroy the brain, they can be free from this. They cannot be brought back. But yeah, there's that interesting thing that happened, right? The girl's body, the physical form, is reincarnated, but the soul, and possibly, the brain or the elements of the brain of Kite, come together, right? I mean, that aspect of it is a bit of an unknown. Even the soul thing is actually not even confirmed or anything, right? I mean, the thing is, they don't actually even discuss that aspect of it, do they? Kite actually explaining how it was possible. Like, he didn't actually explain, or rather, sorry, she didn't actually explain that element or that aspect of it to Gon. I mean, it's not important at that point, but I'm looking at it as an audience member who's looking for some answers, right? And I'm sure that's not about to happen in the next episode. So if there's any answers, maybe in the manga, but even then, honestly, I'm not truly expecting some kind of deep dive into it, especially because this is also a wrap up. This truly felt like one final add-in or add-on for the Chimera Ant arc. But, once again, going back to, Gon imminently coming across Jing again. I mean, of course, I expect him to climb that tree and, get up there. He'll get up there. And Jing knows it. Jing understands that Gon can do this. And, I do like that. I kind of touched up on this. I do like that, this goodbye didn't bleed into the final episode. I mean, I really don't expect anything, from that side anymore. Right, the Gon and Killua angle, because this is just far too definitive for them to come back in all of a sudden, right? Maybe listen, at the end of the day, it is a finale, so maybe in a certain segment, I might see Killua and Aluka, and I might see many of the other characters, and setup moments and plot threads for the story to continue into the manga and all of that. I've got some expectations in the finale or for the finale, and then of course beyond that. Right. Since I've been covering, anime content on the channel, I've always come across this thing, not just in the comments, just as a whole, that, sometimes the anime is actually meant to get people into the manga. Now, I'm not sure how true that statement is, but I'm kind of also looking at the final episode as something like that, as in it probably is going to give me some exciting stuff. Right? The type of stuff that does pull you into the manga. But, that being said, I'm not really sure how long any of these breaks ended up being. The breaks that Togashi felt that he needed to take. And of course, essentially had to take because of the health issues. And, that's one of my priorities as well, to learn much more about that. Of course, out of the fear of potentially running into spoilers, I could not look any of that up. And I know I can maybe get other people to give me that information, but still, I did my best, or tried my best, to just kind of be in the moment and be just in the middle of the story, and not begin to look for other things right now. But now that I am reaching the conclusion really soon enough, now it is quite a priority for me to really kind of understand how things have played out for Tagashi, right? His health concerns, and any other things that he must have shared in that time. So the initial point is, I'm not sure how much time has passed, or did pass rather, from the ending of the anime, episode 148, to the manga, or the continuation of the manga, or just the breaks in the middle, how long these breaks must have been. So I'm not entirely able to understand that dynamic just yet. So maybe, this whole idea of setting up stuff in the last episode for the things to come in the manga, maybe it might not be at play, but I do think there's probably going to be some exciting stuff set up here, right? So yeah, I might still get to see a glimpse of Killua and Aluka, off and about doing their thing now, and many of the others as well. Right, Leorio and Kurapika, and the Hunter Association, the new chairman, and that dynamic. Maybe I'll get glimpses of all of these things, right? Maybe even Phantom Troop. I don't know, man. The thing about that type of presentation is that you really only need like a single frame, even, right, to just give us something on a lot of characters and their trajectory. Because listen, at the end of the day, yes, Gon and Killua have been the focal point. It's quite the expansive story. It's quite the expansive ensemble cast. Incredible ensemble cast at that. All of them unique. All of them have their own really unique story arcs, and really unique draw. So, I do hope that the final episode is more so a celebration of the whole thing. But again, of course, it's also going to be quite a focus on Gon and Jing. Because again, Gon is about to reach the end of his journey, right? At least this journey. He's a young man. He's a young man. He's got a lot of years and decades ahead of him, right? But this journey is certainly coming to an end. But, allow me once again to go back to Gon and Jing, and that journey that Gon's been on, that incredible journey, those incredible experiences that he's had, coming across some incredible people. Mentors and friends, and just incredible people all around. And it's been so unique, right? You think of, the Hunter exam, you think of Great Island, you think of, Heaven's Arena, and you think of everything else that came after that, right? I mean, at this point, Gon must have quite the understanding of the life of a hunter, right? But, again, speaking to Jing, kind of listening to him and, taking it straight from the source is still something a little bit different. So I can definitely appreciate that aspect of it, kind of almost bookending it, getting to meet Jing and talking to him and asking him specific questions. And of course, this, the world tree, it's quite hand selected. Of course it's hand selected, right? So, that's going to come into play. Why exactly did Jing feel that, this is the spot, right, that Gon has to get to? And then of course beyond that, being above, having that, having that perspective on things. I mean, you see that the Peggy lookalike, or the Peggy twin, essentially. I thought that's a really lovely touch as well. Again, given that it's the same voice actor as well as the narrator and as Peggy, he described it as one of the tallest. And that even now, man hasn't been able to create a structure taller than that, right? So, I mean, not one of the tallest. I think, the world tree is meant to be the tallest or the highest peak, from the things he's saying, right? The tour guide. So, yeah, it's deliberate, to have Gon have that perspective as they talk it out, as really specific things get brought up. So, yeah, I'm excited about that. Jing, listen, not the greatest father, but Jing is this really fascinating and intriguing character. And he's a master hunter. He's one of the master hunters in that community, right? So, I'm really quite excited for that and everything that's going to come out of that. And again, that, that vantage point, that elevation, the view from above, high above, right? It's almost as if it's like, yeah, I'll meet you, I'll see you again, but it's going to be so out of sight from anyone else. It'll just be us two, truly be us two. And also, I'm kind of looking at it from Jing's perspective as well. Maybe he feels that, yeah, he needs to be in this type of location as well for, this proper meetup, proper one-on-one, you know? Because you see, not too long ago, right, in the Hunter Association, in that auditorium, a lot of that is really quite new for him. And at first, he's really bamboozled by the whole thing, right? The outpouring of emotions. But now, even Jing has a bit of an experience, right, from that get-together, chance encounter, and all of that. So, it'll be a little bit easier for Jing. The second time around, the official catch-up, I suppose, the meetup. But yeah, let's kind of go back to the journey's end aspect of it, right? The boys having to say goodbye, right? As a chapter closes for both of them. But as those chapters close, new ones begin. This episode is certainly about endings and beginnings. That's always the case. As one door closes, another one opens. And listen, I know that sounds kind of definitive. I'm not saying that door is closed forever, but it's definitive enough that for the foreseeable future, yeah, they're about to be on really different trajectories, and they're about to do their own thing, and rightfully so. I do think Gon is really quite understanding and apologetic about the things that happened, but he's a young child still, right? You see that it took the koala, an adult who's lived an adult life, right? It's quite a, I don't know, dicey life that he lived as an assassin, and there's no shocker there, of course. I think that's something I even speculated all the way back in the NGL. And even back then, there's that moment of him on that cliff saying something like, no hope, right? No hope. That makes a lot of sense at this point, doesn't it? But yeah, for someone like Gon, I think it's still going to take some time to really truly understand the things that happened and the things that he put into motion as well, and the choices he made, the definitive choices that he made. I think it'll take a few more years for him, and even beyond that, to really truly understand that. Hold on, man. I was just not thinking straight. Truly wasn't thinking straight. And also speaking of those years ahead, the thing is, unless they set up something really quite definitive for Gon in the next episode, like I said, his journey is coming to an end for now, right? But Killua, his is the next point in his life, and perhaps for the rest of his life, is really quite clear. He found his purpose in life, and you see that Gon is happy for it and for Killua. He understands that he has to let Killua go now, right? And you see that beautiful choice to actually end off that montage, again accompanied by the Greed Island theme. Perfect. Just how perfect is that choice? In highlighting the entire journey. The good times, the bad times, the challenging times, the incredible times, the fun times, all of that stuff, right? You see by the end of it, the choice is made to focus on that little mini arc, right? And I spoke of this, I think, in the last episode's discussion, or maybe a couple of episodes ago, in terms of, Killua finding his goal in life, or his path in life, right? Purpose in life. He has it now. And that's kind of the pact that they had at that point on Whale Island, right? For now, join me, and then you can maybe find your path. You can find your purpose. And Killua felt the same. Yeah, I'll join you for now, and maybe I'll find my purpose in that time. And he has. And again, as Killua reiterates, Gon facilitated that. There's a lot to thank Gon for, right? There's a lot of thanking going on here. And I made a point of saying that because of Killua's stance on that, right? I feel like here it's maybe a good choice to not take that aspect of it too literally, right? But also maybe a part of it is this idea of, okay, yeah, the friendship has changed forever. But listen, at the most basic level, I don't think Killua doesn't consider Gon a friend. They are going to be friends forever, right? Gon, you see he wants to reiterate that as well. He brings up something Kai told him. It can be years, it can be decades, they can be at the other side of the planet, but they'll always be friends. And listen, I'm sure many of us can agree. Listen, I'm the type of person who doesn't have, a crazy circle of friends, or best friends rather. I know a lot of people, I do, but there's only really a couple of them that I could actually, consider good friends, really good friends. The type of friends that I know I can get in contact with, today or a month from now or even a year from now. Right. But it doesn't actually end up happening like that. I've never actually not spoken to any of these, close friends for a year. But, the friendship is strong enough, right? The fundamentals, the foundation is strong enough that I know and they know that if for some reason it does, play out like that, that both of us can still just pick up exactly where we left off. And, I've done that and they've done that. Plenty of times, both of us have done that, right? And it's a beautiful thing to have. So I kind of look at this phase of Gon and Killua's friendship as that, that they definitely need some time apart, but they're always kind of there. But right now, there's no immediate urge to actually, get in contact because they both understand that they do need to separate for a bit, right? And focus on things that are not related to each other. And kind of focus on themselves. And for Killua, that is focusing on, his sister, right? He jokes about Gon being second at this point, number 2 to Alucard. But, I think, I actually even felt that episodes ago. Remember? I used to talk about, I actually do think that, maybe Alucard, his sister, is the most important person to him in the world. And, that's as simple as just because that's a sibling and these two siblings have an incredible relationship, the type of relationship the other Zoldycks are not able to have or capable of having or even open to having with someone like Alucard, right? And this is around the time, Illumi is trying to explain all the rules and the chains to Hisoka, in terms of who's going to be affected if the requests are not fulfilled and all of that. But yeah, it's a simple concept, but life goes on. It does. Life has a natural forward momentum. It just does. And I think that's actually showcased throughout this episode as well, be it in the koala and kite scenes, be it in the, Gon and Killua scenes. Right? Be it the upcoming, Gon and Jing meetup. I'm sure it's going to be reflected in that as well. Life always has a natural forward momentum. And that's just been my experience with life. And I'm sure for many of you, it's been really quite similar as well. But yeah, going back to that idea of this feeling really quite surreal. And, by the time the ending kicks in and it takes us through that special friendship one more time, it became a little too real. That this is officially the sign off for this. And I think it's actually even more impactful given the fact that the anime continuing or coming back or going into production again is still a massive unknown. But, once again, like I said earlier, through its inception and its ups and downs, its triumphant moments, right? Challenging moments and all of that, devastating moments, I truly feel I have experienced one of the best friendships in all of anime. And again, to me, it really kind of felt like that a promise is being made here that indeed this is going to end up being one of the greatest friendships all the way back in the Hunter exam. But let's kind of go back to this idea of a lot of interesting choices in this episode. Right, be it the runtime allocation throughout the episode, but then also the choice or choices to skip over certain moments that have been set up for some time now, right? There's quite a bit of setup for, the Gon and Killua reunion and the subsequent conversations that might take place. But, let's also include Alucard as well, right? Ultimately, all of that ends up happening off screen. And you saw my reaction the moment I saw, all three of them just kind of on that mountain towards, going towards the tree itself. It's jarring, it is rather surprising. It is. It simply is. I'm sure it must have been the same thing for all of you. But also, it's not the type of surprise that makes you annoyed or frustrated. Did I want and expect a dedicated reunion and, the subsequent discussions between them? Yes, absolutely I did. But, once I know that the choice has been made to keep that moment a bit more private, right, and slightly open to interpretation, I can live with it. I can. You know, I'm not sitting here feeling jaded or frustrated that I didn't get to see it. Hell, I think I can even say I appreciate that approach. You know, once it's been made, you know, once it's definitive, okay, it happened off screen. Now, you know, let's look at it in this capacity. I can appreciate it. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, it's a deliberate choice. You know, it's not as if Tagashi ran out of steam or anything, or that he was afraid of actually focusing on that. No, not at all, right? It's really quite a deliberate artistic choice or writing choice to, you know, have it be more of a private moment. And listen, even though it is, you know, perhaps open to interpretation, a lot of it, it's not that open to interpretation. You know, us, the audience, can essentially put together a lot of it anyways, right? How it must have played out, especially given Killua's reactions and his mood about the whole thing, right? Like I said, it's really, really cool. And it's really nice to see him just be so playful about the whole thing now, right? Or did I say that yet? Maybe I didn't. And if I didn't, yeah. I loved how Killua is just so playful about it. Yeah, I guess, you know, I'll repeat myself there. To me, it really kind of shows Killua's mindset that, you know, okay, you know, it's everything's kind of, you know, figured out. They talked it out and he accepted it, right? He's not the type to hold grudges, especially because now, you know, he has a purpose in life as well. You know, there's no point in holding any grudges. Of course, he understands that, you know, Gon feels terrible about the whole thing. So, you know, at this point, just through Killua's fun, you know, approach, you know, being able to tease Gon about it, that also tells you quite a bit about how it played out behind closed doors, essentially, you know, off screen. But, you know, I do believe that approach, it really certainly adds to the bittersweet nature and the mood that's being created here, right? Like I said, there's a definitive sense of melancholy just coursing throughout, right? I think it's actually really effectively reflected the feelings of the two boys. And I think ultimately a lot of things are perhaps open to interpretation for them as well. I mean, yes, you know, it's certainly quite happy and jolly on the surface, right? And yes, even then, you know, those are authentic feelings as well. You know, I'm not saying all of it is just manufactured and, you know, a happy mask that they're putting on, but they are, you could tell, you know, they're putting on a bit of it at least. But yeah, even though there are some really authentic feelings on display, you can still see and you can just tell that there are still some complicated feelings beneath, right? The friendship has fundamentally changed forever. You know, I believe I said that in the beginning of the discussion. I mean, it's kind of even difficult to remember the things I said earlier on, right in the beginning. But yeah, it has changed forever. And they both understand that. You know, it's something that doesn't even need to be spoken out loud. They both just know. They can feel it. They can understand it, right? And I think it's reflected in the visual storytelling of you know, that part as well, especially the expressions and those lingering feelings. So I certainly feel strongly that, you know, certain parts of their friendship have shifted forever, you know, damaged perhaps forever. But, you know, the question here is that, is it, you know, irreparable damage, right? I think one thing is clear: some elements of that friendship are changed forever. You know, it is something that cannot be restored. Again, certain aspects of it, based on, you know, these really recent experiences as well. But, you know, this idea of the palpable tension, the melancholy, and all of that, I think, you know, ultimately the silence speaks volumes, doesn't it? You know, those lingering moments of silence. A lot is said in the unspoken just as much as the spoken. I mean, hell, you could actually even look at it as, you know, the unspoken actually being a bit more poignant in these moments. But, you know, once again, these interesting choices that are made here, you know, before I even get to see Gon with Killua, you see that Gon has now met with Leorio, and it's really quite an emotional reunion, right? Really one of the standout moments of this arc and maybe the anime as a whole, right? Gon and Leorio's reunion. And, you know, Leorio being the first friend that he actually does get to meet after, you know, being healed. But again, you know, at that point, maybe meeting Killua is still just not a possibility, right? Because of, again, having to be out of sight the moment Gon comes to, because of the whole, you know, restriction element of it, Aluka, and, you know, the rules that are put in place. But, you know, again, you see quite an emotional reunion with Leorio, right? Just incredibly touching. Then I've also seen him meet and apologize both to Jing and Kite, new Kite, that is. And perhaps the one person, a really important person in his life, someone that is, or maybe actually used to be the most important person in his life, in Killua, that reunion, that apology, that reconciliation happened off screen, right? And that's an incredible choice to make, given all the things that led to this, and how dead set Killua was on getting that apology as well. But again, that's Killua, isn't it? Yeah, perhaps in that moment he really kind of felt like that, but yeah, you see that his mind changed, right? His stance changed, perhaps almost immediately after that. But yeah, I think it's a really deliberate writing choice, and it's really quite clear to see that, there's a lot that's left unsaid. Even if both of them do want to address it, they feel that they cannot address it, right? There's still a lot of things that are left unresolved. That's how it feels. And, realistically, I suppose that might be because some of these things cannot be resolved. And I think, the whole approach is actually really rather grounded, really grounded, really quite realistic. It's not just, a perfectly packaged, super jolly, over the top, goodbye, because that would have been so out of place. And I honestly, I wasn't expecting that anyways, right? Sure, I was expecting maybe a bit more time allocated to that, the actual scene. But again, it's really not some kind of make or break type thing, at least for me. But I am interested in seeing if other people felt a little bit robbed or a little bit frustrated by that writing choice. Because, I think even if you do actually focus on it, how much can you actually really focus on? Like I said, both these boys, they need to spend a lot of time apart at this point. It's healthy, it's good for them. But, Gon specifically, he's not going to really understand the magnitude of all of it. Yes, he's taken responsibility, and he most definitely understands, quite a bit of that. The choices he made, the devastating choices that he made, the unthinkable choices that he made. You go back to that scene of him and Leorio in the cab. He really truly felt like he has to immediately find Killua, right? But still, I think, these types of things take years, especially for someone like Gon, who isn't as emotionally mature as someone like Killua either. But, listen, even Killua can use a lot of time now. Perhaps a couple years from now, even Killua might have a bit of a different understanding for some of these things that played out. And yes, of course, even though it's this incredible friendship, you simply cannot gloss over the fact how Gon actually has approached it time and time again, right? In his assumptions of Killua's role in it, unintentionally hurting Killua as well, and that's really quite clear to see in the Chimera Ant arc, right? So yes, there's a lot of maturing that needs to happen as well. And I know it might sound a little bit harsh, man. But it's because I care for Gon. I adore this character. So I think, he is going to need much more time apart and by himself to, truly understand the extent of all of it, fully understand the consequences of his actions, right? That takes time. That simply takes time, right? Even if he is already quite apologetic, I do believe he does need to live with it for a bit. I feel that, as perhaps a year or two or the years go on, he'll begin to actually, he'll gain a different perspective, right? As he gets older, and he'll be able to look at those times in his life with Killua from a different angle, right? So, everything I'm saying here is because, I want Gon to grow and mature from all of this. And of course, he's already showing signs of it. But, there's much more ahead of him, I think. But, I don't want to leave it off on that point. I do want to reiterate that it is a beautiful friendship. It is. It simply is. And, at no point did it feel like Killua is actually sugarcoating to protect Gon, right? This idea of really, truly thanking him for the things that happened because of, this incredible time that he's had with Gon, this incredible friendship that they've shared. Right? Ultimately, it did lead to him finally being able to help Aluka, right? It's a full circle thing, right? Gon saved Killua, he helped Killua, Killua saved Aluka, and ultimately Aluka ends up saving Gon. And that's only possible because of a really distinct and specific relationship, rare and unique relationship Aluka has with Killua, and actually, Aluka and the other, Nanika, right? Nanika is a member of Killua's family as far as Killua is concerned. And, that was kind of like the breakthrough moment that Killua had really quite recently as well, right? Just in the last episode, he almost kind of fell into the same patterns as the other Zoldycks, right? Even if it's unintentional, right? Him trying to suppress the other, again, in an attempt to protect both Aluka and the other, right? That they cannot be abused or misused. He kind of realized, okay, I'm kind of doing the same thing as the other Zoldycks, my other, family members, trying to get rid of, this thing. It's a thing to them, essentially, a thing that they implore him to not consider a member of the family. But yeah, this coming together, this, incredible friendship, it has been life altering, right? For Killua. It completely just changed his trajectory. It really facilitated and it allowed Killua all of this clarity, right? Breaking free from his abusive and controlling family, and ultimately, carving out his own unique path and independence, right? And his own purpose in life now, after remembering Aluka, right? Because of the needle and all of that. And of course, the removing of the needle being an integral component of it all. So yeah, Killua is certainly being sincere, right? He's not trying to, make Gon feel less guilty or anything. He truly appreciates everything Gon has done for him. And, in addition, Aluka and the other. It's because of Gon. He truly feels like it's because of Gon he was able to make, those leaps and bounds in his own, family, in his own, life and trajectory and his path in life, and gaining that independence to the point that he's open to actually dedicating his life to this purpose now, protecting his little sister. But, let's kind of shift the focus back to Kite and the koala. And again, Gon as well, Kite and Gon sit down. But, specifically here, at first, I do want to look at the things that Kite is able to do for the koala. I mean, it's clear to see that Kite still has so much to offer. And again, the things that are kind of focused on here, this concept of reincarnation, once again, one of the most integral components of the Chimera Ant arc. This idea of the possibilities of reincarnation, the incredible, of course, possibility of reincarnation, a second chance at life, rebirth. Death and rebirth is, again, an integral component of the sit down with the koala and, again, the Chimera Ant arc, but also kind of taking a look at, the possibilities of such a miracle, if you will. Right? The responsibilities of it, the positives, the negatives, right? The issues with reincarnation and, the idea of repeating cycles. Listen, you see throughout the Chimera Ant arc, it's not all good people that get reincarnated, right? And you see really early on in the NGL component of this Chimera Ant arc that some of them are really downright nasty, right? And again, it's an exploration of the human condition, what it means to be human, and how, all of that really kind of had this incredible, significant impact on the Chimera Ants. It did a number on the Chimera Ants as a whole, right? It changed them forever. And, it's at the heart of a lot of the things that these Chimera Ants experience. And, that goes all the way to the top, to the late King Meruem. And again, the iconic royal guards. Oh man, all of a sudden I just had that mental image, the mental image of I guess the afterlife, right? As Meruem tells Komugi, you can tell me, I'll be seeing them soon enough. Oh, see, I'm getting choked up thinking about that again. It's poignant stuff. It really is. And to, have it kind of come back in right at the end of things here. I think it's actually really quite effective, even if it is quite a ballsy and significant choice to have it, be a significant part of the penultimate episode. And I think it's also really quite clear that, it's Togashi kind of getting to, share some of his own philosophy and his own thoughts, maybe gives him a chance to preach a bit. But, the key to that is that you don't want to come off too preachy. Right? That can happen from time to time. And as you know, I did feel that at times it got a little bit preachy, right near the conclusion of the Chimera Ant arc, humans bad. I really felt that the point was already made quite, adequately. So, maybe it got a tad bit preachy at times, but nothing too egregious. But here I really truly felt like this is Tagashi giving himself a bit of runtime here as well, to make such a choice to focus on this, and again kind of speaking through the koala even. But as far as Kite having so much more to offer, yeah, you see the really unique approach with Gon, and then the really unique approach with Koala, our pink koala, right? And even like I said, it's a really interesting choice, and I think it's a really effective choice to actually have the sit down with the koala at first, before Gon comes in and does his own apology. And I think there's a really cool moment, really interesting moment as they do cross. They kind of focus on that shot of koala crossing each other, one towards the door, one towards the couch. And I think this whole thing kind of really presented quite the contrast, right? The koala and Gon, but ultimately both are essentially in a similar mindset. Both of them are looking for a bit of salvation, right? It goes back to the title of the episode, Salvation and Future. I mean, the episode title certainly is quite effective, quite fitting. It usually is. I always like to kind of go back to the episode titles. But a thing I really like, and I think it's kind of clear to see here presented in this segment, that the universe has a funny way to keep us humble. Always. And in this case, the characters of this anime or this segment as well, most definitely the koala. I mean, listen, confession is good for the soul. It just is. Remorse is quite a burden. There are a few things that are harder to bear than remorse, right? It's what separates us from the animals. And, in this case, it's even more poignant given the nature of the chimera ants, right? And how they are able to, look like this fluffy, adorable, pink koala, but then also, having to deal with the human condition. But then to finish off my point about remorse, is that the purpose of remorse, perhaps? To keep us, or to keep them from making the same mistakes again. I mean, all of this is applicable to real life. I mean, it is from real life. I feel like a lot of us can relate to a lot of these things. But, going back to that idea of Kite still having so much to offer, you see that ultimately Kite offers the koala purpose, right? A sense of purpose. Like I said, structure, redemption, a chance at redemption, perhaps. A direction, the right direction at this point in time. An outlet, right, to potentially atone for his mistakes, a way or a chance to escape that cycle, and ultimately all of it possibly and potentially leading to a meaningful life, right? Something that the koala simply cannot see in his future, right? He thinks he's trapped forever in this incredibly deflating cycle. He thinks he's trapped forever, essentially, right? And he only sees one way out. And, Kite doesn't allow him to take that way out. So that was the point I was making about Kite taking really unique approaches here. Kite took everything the koala had to share, right? And had quite a nuanced understanding for it. And ultimately opens the door for him, right? Presenting a possible path for our koala to possibly one day forgive himself. And I think, Kite had such a definitive understanding of the situation that she realized it simply had to be something from someone else, right? Especially given whose body this is as well, right? So Kite, forces this on him. So he is held accountable, right? So he does kind of answer to someone. And that someone being, again, the carbon copy of the person he shot down, the red-haired girl that he shot down. But Kite understood that she has to essentially, step in. But, in this really unique case, it's not the bad type of force, because you see it's most welcome, right? As showcased in the koala's reaction. At this point, the presentation's more of like a blue, like a darker, richer blue. And you see the glimmer of hope in his eyes. That's, the exact thing that's being presented there. It's a glimmer in his eye. And I think it's just straight up a glimmer of hope in his eye, right? So the koala needed this. It's a good type of force. Because ultimately, I think even the koala understood, right? This koala there's quite a bit of self-awareness, present, but, he understood that he lacked the strength, the mental fortitude, right? The conviction to arrive at a satisfying path and conclusion to achieve redemption himself. And he certainly understands that his own attempts and his actions have been insufficient up to this point, right? You see that he's frustrated, he's disillusioned, he's just lost, hopeless, right? No hope. And you can see he's probably already in a state of depression. And ultimately, it's only leading to one thing, right? In his mind, the only one thing, the one way out, because ultimately he cannot forgive himself. But yeah, ultimately, and like I said a little bit earlier, life has a natural forward momentum. And the thing is, Jing actually kind of shared something similar with Gon in the last episode as well, right? To improve himself, to promise not to make the same mistakes again, right? And keep moving on. You see that both Gon and Koala did the things that they did to come to terms with their failures, right? It certainly drove Gon to the extreme and, beyond that. And ultimately, repeating the same mistakes over and over again, it just isn't good for the soul, is it? Right? And I love that both Gon and Koala embrace the path to change, both admitting their mistakes, understanding their mistakes, even though, like I said, Gon is still young, he needs a bit more time, right? This kind of reminds me, the koala is just now beginning to come to terms and kind of getting a path to perhaps a potential meaningful life, right? Atonement and all of that. So, you cannot expect someone like Gon, someone that young, to have a complete understanding for, the nature of life and mistakes and all of that, right? But again, I think he's done a good job. The lad's on the right path, right? He understands and he has taken responsibility. And, you see that Kite is really quite understanding of all of it. Ends up encouraging Gon, ends up opening up to Gon as well about, his own shortcomings, her own shortcomings. I suppose I can use both. But yeah, I think it is a really good choice, really effective choice to showcase the pink koala's perspective, right before Gon enters. This idea of repeating the cycle and trying to break from it. This idea of repeating behaviors or repeating a cycle. It is something I've seen or experienced with Gon since the beginning of the anime. Right? Falling into same patterns, sometimes not quite learning his lesson and repeating those same mistakes, those self-destructive tendencies popping up from arc to arc, taking it to the extreme. And also you can even bring in Killua, right? Killua's own assassin background. And I'm speaking of, comparing Killua and Koala's perspectives. Again, yeah, that assassin background and this idea of finding a direction of his own, a purpose of his own. These are things that the koala struggled with as well. And another thing I kind of like here is that you see that Gon kind of learns that perhaps even Kite wasn't that ideal hunter that he had in his mind, right? Especially, because of the dynamic between Kite and Jing, right? So, ultimately, from Gon's perspective, Kite earning Jing's praise and friendship meant that this is an incredible hunter. And that means that it can't be his fault that he died, right? I'm looking at, from Gon's perspective, up until recently at least. And again, everything that led to him making that choice against Neferpito, ultimately, Gon must have thought Kite's too good for that. So it simply must have been my fault for, hindering him and getting him killed. But here, Kite opens up and shares. He's quite forthcoming. It appears that even I need to train some more. Even I need to, learn some more. Kite is being really quite truthful in that moment that he needs to grow and learn and train more as well. But he truly felt that God needs to hear this. I should share this thought that I have about myself with Gon, right? And, that's the idea of the burden being lifted by the time Gon gets out of there. You see, that's the Gon. That's the Gon that all of us saw all that time ago. The same Gon that entered the auditorium, that smile, that wave, that, that jolly and goofy look on his face as he's, saying thank you to the whole crowd. Yeah, you see Kite understood that, I kind of have to free this kid from this burden that could actually hinder him for the rest of his life, right? It's the type of burden that they want to really clarify. Jing made sure to step in and clarify, whoa, hold on, hold on, hold on. Okay, let's get serious here. No, 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 no. It's not that you had to die. It's that uh, ultimately, even someone like Kite is capable of making a mistake, a miscalculation, and that's exactly how it played out. No, you should not have died in his place, because ultimately Kite had it covered anyways, and he had no he had no intentions of sacrificing himself for anyone, or for you. He had it covered. And then again, that kind of gets into this idea of Gon just, I don't know, just going all in, just going so far in, and just ultimately being himself. And at the end of the day, Kite had it covered. He just did, and Gon just didn't know enough about any of that. But let's kind of look to the future, the immediate future, the grand finale, episode 148. Like I said, I'm expecting a lot of it to be centered around Gon and Jing, and ultimately Gon getting to meet Jing in his element, right, and get a true understanding for Jing, the master hunter. I feel like it's about to be a really impactful episode. I feel that it might be perhaps one of the most thematically relevant. I mean, given that it is a finale, that's a given anyways. And yeah, like I said, I'm really quite excited, because this is going to be a totally different dynamic. It's going to be one-on-one. They can openly talk and perhaps discuss Jing's Gon's wonderful journey to get here. And that simply has to be a key component, because I've truly, believed, again, since even the Great Island arc, even before, yeah, I think it mostly came about around the Great Island mark, that the journey itself is just as important. And, I think it was really reflected recently as well in Gon's return, and just in this arc, the election arc, the incredible people coming together for Gon, surrounding Gon, and, that one really incredible moment of him coming into the auditorium, surrounded by those incredible people, the connections, the bonds, the journey is being, depicted at that point. And I really hope that Gon ends up understanding all of that, the nature of it and the structure of it all, right? That the journey and these experiences that he's had have been just as important, perhaps even more important, right? Than this, end point. But, also beyond that, now that Gon is going to meet Jing in this capacity, how exactly is he going to move forward, right? His next purpose in life, or his next goal in life, his trajectory and all of that, right? Let's see if it actually kind of sets something up for Gon in the next episode. I don't know. It really is truly setting this up as the end of the line, the end of his journey, right? For now at least, of course. But yeah, I just kind of need to get to the next episode. Is Gon going to feel satisfied and fulfilled? And listen, man, they still haven't addressed any lingering, long-term issues with him after, getting healed, after making that crazy and unthinkable choice, to make that covenant with himself, to, use up his future potential. And I mean, Neferpitou certainly felt that, yeah, he's ready to never use Nen again in exchange for this. And that was, Neferpitou's reading of it. So, is that going to be addressed here? It hasn't been so far. Even though he has been healed by Aluka and the other, I'm still kind of, I'm not over that just yet. This idea of, consequences and connotations, of borrowing his future potential in that incredibly self-destructive moment. Did the healing process just take all of that? But going back to finally meeting Jing, once it's all said and done, is he still going to have the need to be in contact with Jing, right? That's the idea of potentially feeling fulfilled and satisfied after this. Let's see. But yeah, I think for now I'll end it off there, folks. But I think, I can probably still bring in some of this stuff into the next episode, given how things play out in the next episode, right? Sometimes you just kind of have to get to the next episode. In this case, quite a substantial episode, right? The grand finale. And listen, isn't it crazy, man? It's crazy, to me at least, that I'm about to complete another iconic, classic, all-timer anime, right? 148 episodes. How fucking insane is that, right? And, it kind of gets added to other incredible anime that I've completed, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, right? Yes, even Death Note, even though it didn't quite live up to, all of that hype and my expectations, it's still one of those anime right, that you simply have to watch. Ava, of course, soon enough, Attack on Titan, and then of course, there's a lot of ongoing anime as well, stuff like Vinland Saga, that is essentially all-timer level, but the story is still in the middle, essentially, right? It still continues, but I'm sure, once it's all said and done, it'll be right up there anyways. And then of course, many of the other ongoing anime that I do check out. And there's other stuff, there's stuff like Cowboy Bebop and many other classics I still have to get to, right? But it's an incredible feeling to actually have something like Hunter x Hunter completed really soon, right? And I certainly hope to see all of you there. But if you enjoyed this, consider dropping a like, consider dropping some comments, give me your thoughts. If you are interested in early access, and at this point just the one early access episode, and possibly full length, timer-based full length, of course, and full opacity, and again, that applies to all 148 episodes, or maybe not, I guess 146, because there's also a few of those, or a couple of those recap episodes. But yeah, full length for all of them, full opacity for all of them. You instantly gain access to all of that. The links to Patreon are in the description, also links to social media. Right then, thank you so much for joining me, folks, and thank you for your time, because time is precious. And I really do hope to see you again soon for the grand finale, Hunter x Hunter episode 148. Until then, take it easy.